So in this video, we will understand a new economic concept, which is called a business cycle. So by the end of this video, we will know what do we mean by business cycle. So let's start. So the definition of business cycle or the concept of business cycle is based mainly on the concept of GDP, which I explained in a previous video. So let me explain what do you mean by business cycle. So let's say I'm gonna just assume some numbers. So let's assume annual data for GDP. So let's say let's say 2017, 2018, 2019, and 2020. Okay, so let's say 2017, and I'm gonna put here the GDP. So let's say this was 14.1 trillion. Let's say here becomes 14.7, and let's say here becomes 14.5, and here becomes 14.2. Okay. If I have annual data for the last 4 years, so can I put these numbers on a timeline? The answer is yes. So if we put on the time on the x-axis, if we put the time, and if we put on the y-axis the GDP, so let's see what we find. So let's say 2017. So let's say this is 17. Let's say this is 18. This is 19, and this is 20. So let's say 2017, 14.1. Let's say this is 14.1. And 14.7 is a little bit higher. So let's say this is 14.7 here, 14.7, 14.5 in 2019. So let's say this is 14.5 here. And then the last one is 2020, 14.2. So let's put here 14. So let's omit these dots. So we'll have a line like this. Okay, so now you understand how did I draw this graph. Okay, so now let's understand this graph now more. So to understand the meaning of business cycle, so let me introduce a couple of economic concepts. So we have a peak and we have a trough. So what do you mean by peak and what do you mean by a trough? So for instance, in my graph here, so this is a peak. So this is the peak. So this is the maximum point. So this is the maximum number of GDP over the past few years. So peak is the highest point. So let's say for instance, so this is Q1 2012. So it's in Q1 2012, this was the highest GDP over the last 5 or 6 years. So this is a peak. What about the lowest GDP over the last 10 years? So the lowest or the minimum point is called trough. So you can see the definition here. So peak is when business activity reach a temporary maximum output. Whenever I say output, I mean the GDP. Trough is the bottom of recession. Now, but I want to focus more on these two concepts. So, what are the phases of business cycle? We have two main phases. So, phase number one is called recession, and the second one is called expansion or booming or recovery. So, recession is what? So, recession simply. So, this is recession. So, you see this part. So the economy enters into recession. So we can define recession as the period between peak and trough. So this is recession, as you can see. This is a recession. Okay. What about booming or expansion or recovery? So start from the lowest point of the business cycle, which we call it trough, until the next peak point, which is here. So this part is called expansion. Okay, so this means this part of the timeline is called expansion. On the other side, this part of the timeline is called recession. Okay, so you have to differentiate between recession and expansion, and you have to know what we mean by peak and trough. So peak is the maximum point, trough is the lowest point. Okay, I'm gonna show you in the next video, like how can you pull up data, real life data on the about the business cycles and data. You can find the data on using a website called NBER. But as I said, I'm gonna show it. I'm gonna explain in details how can you get the data from this website in the next video. But when you see the next video, you will see this part on the website of the NBER. As you can see, the peak, trough, and the length of recession. As I said in the previous slide, so a recession can be defined as the period between peak and trough. So for example, this is after the 2008, 2009 financial crisis. So the peak was December 07, and the trough was June 09. Okay, so if you count the number of months between December 07 and June 09, it's going to be like 1 year and a half. So the length of recession was 18 months. As you can see it here. So this is, so see, this is 2007 here. So this is the peak. And the trough was June 2009 here. So this is June 2009, and this is December 2007. As you can see, so this is recession. So this part is recession. So that's why this period, which is from December 07 to June 09, this is called recession. And then the market keeps, since June 2009, the market keeps going up and up and up. Okay, until the pandemic until the COVID pandemic. So this is called expansion. Okay, so this is economic growth is the change of the GDP. So I'm going to solve this example, but let me explain it by easier way first. So let's say example number one, let's say GDP in 2011 was this number, 15,052 billion. And then 2012, this is the GDP. So how can we find the economic growth? So economic growth is simply take the difference between the two GDP. So remember before I said whenever you want to find the so economic growth is the percentage of a change in GDP. To make it easy for you, so new minus old, divide by old, and then multiply by 100. Okay, so economic growth is simply the percentage of a change in the GDP. So what I mean by the new, so this is 2012 in this case, so just simply take 15,471 minus the old GDP, which is 15,052, divide by the old, which is 15,052, and then multiply by 100, and this will give you the economic growth. This is what I have for the business cycle. See you in the next video. Bye-bye.